Hi there, welcome back to the Bus Bot Scottish Football Podcast. I am Hamish. I've got Callum and Matt alongside me for this very special episode where we chat about our miserable football teams. Matt, tell me why your team Aberdeen are the worst of our three.
Because we can't buy a win, and we should really be challenging your Celtic to at least second place. Unfortunately, it's just not working this season. It's gone off the rails a wee bit, and we can't buy a win. So, disappointing few months, but here we are.
Callum, make your case for Killie.
Well, I think that there's absolutely no competition here when it comes to who's the worst team in the league out of our three respective clubs. Kilmarnock are bottom of the form table. I think Aberdeen are second bottom of the form table. So I think that evidently shows why we're the worst team in the league, especially just where we are in the league table. 10 defeats in our last 13 games, extremely worrying. But fingers crossed we can pick it up for here and hopefully preserve our Premier League status.
I hear what you're saying, guys. I take your points on board, but have either of you looked on the Celtic Twitter feed today? Have you seen the tweets that idiotic establishment have sent out? They've had 2 happy birthdays, or maybe 3 happy birthdays. We got an on this day for when Tom Rogic signed for the club. One of the happy birthdays was Olivier Ncham, who's just left the club in disgrace about a week ago. You're not beating Celtic, lads. I don't care what any says. At least your Twitter feeds are holding up to some sort of an extent, no?
Don't know about that. Whenever Aberdeen tweet, it's just people have now started responding with a Derek McInnes, and it's got a big red target over his head. So that's all the responses just now. And Aberdeen have been putting out a few birthdays and things like that, I think, as well. Not as much as you, because I know how much you like the Celtic birthdays, Hamish. You've been going on about it for 2 weeks. So
what is this obsession with wishing former players and current players and folk who played a handful of games for the club 25 years ago a happy birthday? Do all clubs do this?
Did Brackback get his birthday special? You were calling for it?
That was an interesting one, Matt, because they never actually tweeted it because I think we'd just lost to Killie, but they did put it up on the the Fleets and on the Insta stories. Just a complete cop-out. Do Killie do birthdays? Do you get birthdays in Kilmarnock? You have Halloween on a weird day, so...
Well, we could have a whole separate podcast on why Halloween celebrated the last Friday, October, is actually the real way to celebrate Halloween. I would ask you guys...
Go on then.
Well, I mean, would you have a birthday party on a Tuesday night, or would you wait till the weekend to have your birthday party?
Aye, but I'm still celebrating my birthday on that day. I'd have a party as well. As what you guys do is you just change the calendar around.
Yeah.
I mean, would you have Christmas on the 20th of December?
No, well, because Christmas is a public holiday, so it doesn't come into that. I mean, Halloween, and it's all to do with industry and stuff as well. Obviously, being a proper working class town that Kilmarnock is, every day was paid on a Friday, therefore people could give more to the kids on a Friday when they were going door to door. So it's the most logical thing the most logical day to celebrate it, without a shadow of a doubt. Kids at 8-10 years old going out trick-or-treating at 10 o'clock in a school night? Nah. Go to be a Friday weekend, enjoy your weekend. So, birthdays. I think we only really do it with current players and maybe club legends.
Is Alex Dyer a club legend?
No, it's a bit of a shame with Dyer. I think that you've got to... I think he left almost just at the right time for his own sake before it went completely sour. Although it still is pretty sour. It's not like he goes with the he goes with 99% of the support's best wishes. We're grateful for the time he was at the club and obviously the great days under Steve Clarke. But I still think he hung on a wee bit too long and maybe should have stepped down in December time. But no, Dyer, for the role that he played under Steve Clarke, without a doubt, yep.
When you look at the fact that you brought in Tommy Wright now, we'll get your thoughts on Tommy Wright in a wee second, but just first off, he's a massive improvement in Alex Dyer, isn't he, when you look at it like manager for manager. So for that point of view, it looks like a really good move to get rid of Dyer and to get Tommy Wright in.
No, without a doubt, Hamish, it's a great point you make, and I'll give a shout out to my my friend Paul Montgomery, who made the exact same point, Monty, who listens to the podcast as well, he said that. He's like, if you strip everything down, regardless of the situation, we've got a massive upgrade here. You know what I mean? And that's with the greatest of respect to Alex Dyer, but Tommy Wright, seasoned pro, bags of experience in Scotland. There's no doubt it's an upgrade, and I sincerely hope that we kick on immediately.
So what can he bring to Kilmarnock then? Because I think he spent 9 years at St Johnstone, won them a cup, but the cup's kind of the crowning jewel. But I think the main thing was that he took over for Steve Lomas and really took them on to the next level. They were consistently finishing top six. I think mainly when Rangers were out of the league, and maybe Hearts and Hibs to a certain extent as well. But I don't want to take too much away from what he did there. It's a good appointment. What can he do at Rugby Park, and how long will it take you to start seeing what he can do? Will it be an instant impact he makes?
Well, I think the good thing about Tommy Wright is that he can come in, and all he really has to do is motivate the players and set us up, make us hard to beat. We're not talking about a guy coming in here and thinking, right, we need a few weeks for him to bed his style in. What his style is what these players are suited to. Counter-attacking, defensive football, and then hopefully longer term can progress on to something else. I keep telling myself day in, day out, I'm worried. Of course, I'm very, very worried with the position that we're in. As I've said, 10 defeats in 13 games.
Have you heard of a football team called Hamilton Accies?
Yes, of course I have.
Are you aware of them?
Yes, the team who never get relegated, yeah.
Oh, Kelly as well.
I know, but I think that we're just... Of course, if you're a Hamilton or Ross County fan, you'd trade your left arm to be in the position that we are. And everybody's still within touching distance each other, even as far up as... I'd say St Mirren are out that now. I suppose you never know what could happen with a couple of defeats here or there. But I'd say St Mirren are safe. Everybody else is round about the same position. As I said, St Johnstone, Dundee United. But again, with that trade where we are for their position, without a shadow of a doubt, I just think that I keep telling myself we've got far too much experience there to go down, and I'm not meaning this, the big club thing. Nobody's too big to go down. We've seen that, Hearts, Hibs, Dundee United, all these clubs who have been relegated for the top flight in recent years. But I think player-wise, I mean, you've got guys, Kurt Broadfoot, Stuart Finlay, Alan Power, Gary Dicker, Chris Burke, even Greg Kilty, who's been through this with Kilmarnock before. I think that blows Accies, Ross County, and maybe even Motherwell and stuff out the water when it comes to experience in this league. So the big ask is to get these guys performing, because that's been the issue all season. And if anybody's got to do it, it's Tommy Wright.
Casey, I've got a question for you. Is the biggest frustration really the fact that you just haven't kicked on since, like, what Stevie Clarke said on the pitch in his last day? Like, it's just kind of, because obviously, like, in the time that we've known you, right, obviously when you came in, when we all kind of became pals and that, you were, you made the playoff, the relegation playoff and all that, like, it was everything. Then it goes up high again, then just back down. That must be so annoying, this fact that it's just not been any progress.
No, but it's a good question, Matt. I think that, again, the guy that I brought up earlier on, Paul Montgomery, I had a conversation with him exactly about the same thing. It's not the fact that we've no kicked on for Steve Clarke. That's as good as it will ever really get for being a Kilmarnock supporter. It's the fact that Steve Clarke was the difference. Like that is the only change Kilmarnock have really been in 10 years. I think that when I broke it down, really, we've only had 2 or 3 good seasons in 10, 11 seasons, which just really isn't good enough. I know we can all joke, and maybe you guys will think that I think Kilmarnock are a bigger club than what they are, but it's worrying that we're constant. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be in relegation battles ever. Of course we should. Everybody's got to face that. But Kilmarnock should be competing for top 6 most seasons. I'd say a par season for Kilmarnock would be about 7th, 8th, competing for top 6 every year. And sometimes maybe going a wee push for Europe, other years, other end of the table. But we should be mid-table. We shouldn't really be in relegation fights every single season, which it seems to be, with the exception of Steve Clarke and mixed with part of Leinen's season, as well as Kenny Shiels. For Kenny Shiels left the club, it was just downward trajectory until Steve Clarke walked in the building, and he gave us a 18 months of happiness, and since then it's been on a decline again.
You're absolutely preaching to the choir with me in terms of that big appointment you made, Steve Clarke. We made a similarly high profile appointment with Brendan Rodgers. We got the rewards from that, like Kelly got the rewards. I was at a Kelly St Mirren game, and Boxing Day a few years ago there was over 7,000 there. Now what would you get? Well, nowadays you get 0, but in a normal world you'd probably get 3,000 or 4,000, maybe slightly more now at a game like that. So I don't understand why Kelly, like Celtic, didn't build for that position of strength. You obviously went with Alessio after Steve Clarke. Maybe from the outside looking in, they thought that was a similar Steve Clarke appointment, and maybe it would have worked out in another world. Maybe if Alessio had been given more time, Kelly wouldn't have been in the place they are now. Maybe, I'm just throwing that out there. You'll know better than me. But my big question that you've touched on, why do teams like Kelly and Celtic, and any team for that matter, not build from a position of strength? You go out and you get a manager like Rodgers, like Clarke, that surprised us both, because we almost thought that was too high a calibre a manager to come to Scotland and to our clubs. And I get you can't do that with every appointment, but when you're at that real high point, for Kelly it was finishing third, for Celtic it was winning back-to-back trebles, three trebles in a row. Why do you not push on for that and get a similar type manager? Why do you then regress and appoint an easy option?
I think all you guys that follow my Twitter will see how much criticism I've given the board from time to time. I've actually got a lot of respect for Billy Bowie and the other members of the board. I've met Billy Bowie a couple of times, really, really nice guy. And I've not got a bad word to say with him in that respect. But I think, in fairness to them, Angelo Alessio seemed to be a very ambitious appointment. And if anything, it was the wrong appointment, there's no doubt about that. A lot of Kelly fans are rewriting history a wee bit with him and saying, he left us in 5th, but it wasn't really 5th. It's the same way that Robbie Neilson left Hearts in 2nd that season to go to MK Dons. He didn't really, it's still like league table standing, yeah. They're never going to sustain that. And I think clubs below them had games in hand. I think we were 5th, but we're on the back of 3 defeats in the trot against teams below us, in only maybe 3 or 4 points for like 9th or something like that. So it was going down with Alessio. He was never backed in the transfer market. Backroom staff technically was brought in a couple of coaches fairly, but he got Massimo Donati to work with him. I don't think they had any relationship beforehand. Donati was more or less a translator, is my understanding. Alex Dyer was forced upon him. I wouldn't say he got found out. I think they tried to play an expansive style of football, again, which people forget. That's how we get beat by Connah's Quay. We had our full-backs playing at the halfway line. We had our centre-halves playing at the halfway line, our full-backs playing as wingers, and that's what cost us both goals, really. Certainly the second goal. And then we went to the most negative football I've ever seen in my life after that, because the players he deemed the players not good enough to try and play expansive football. So they did do that, and then they made a mistake by giving the job to Alex Dyer, which was just so poor. Not even the fact, when they sacked Alessio, they gave Dyer the job until the end of the season. They said, we've not made a decision yet. Dyer's interim manager. We go and get 3 defeats in the bounce, lose to Motherwell home 1-0, Rangers at Ibrox 1-0, St Mirren away 1-0. And then after the St Mirren game, Dyer gets interviewed on BBC. Do you want the job? Do you want the job? Refuses to answer it. Says the board know where I am. So he doesn't even say he wants a job. And then in the back of that, Alex Dyer's now Kilmarnock manager to the end of the season. You're thinking, in what other role would you get a trial period and lose 3 games in the bounce?
Sounds familiar. I know, it sounds familiar.
Lose 3 games in the bounce to get the job. And I feel bad because I knew Dyer wasn't going to work, but I was willing to give him a chance, willing to give him the transfer window in January and the transfer window in the summer, and he's had more than enough of his own players in, and it just didn't work. Never was going to. I think when Clarke left, you had guys like Paul Clement and stuff in for the job. Don't get me wrong, he just got sacked for some club in Belgium who were in the relegation fight, but he was exactly like cut for the same cloth as Stevie Clarke. Assistant manager to Ancelotti, Chelsea, Bayern Munich, Paris Saint-Germain, Real Madrid. And you go with Alessio, who is just far too unknown. So I can see why the board went that way. They tried to go too ambitious. Bear in mind, Billy Bowie said that we had the best manager in the league when he appointed Angelo Alessio as well. I mean, look at that now. I mean, it's funny how things work out. But I don't know. I think Tommy Wright is the most stable appointment we could ever go for. it's no exciting, but it's what the club need to know, and I sincerely hope that it can do that. We've been in the Premier League since 1993. I know Matt touched on, for you guys have known me, Kilmarnock have been relegation fodder, minus that period under Stevie Clark. But before that, Kilmarnock were always, late 90s European football, competing at the top end of the league. Mid 2000s stability under Jim Jeffries, late 2000s falling out, and then we had that period in really, really poor form. Things come in cycles. Kilmarnock should be a top flight club, and I sincerely hope Tommy Wright can keep us there.
Those happy days when there was a smile on your face all the time, and you could go out with your pals and have a drink on the Saturday after Killie have just beaten Celtic or Rangers with Killie. I remember there was like a December game that season with Steve Clark where you went top of the league. I think you beat Livingston at home, and it was just remarkable. And we all knew at the time that you were never going to keep that up, but it's a shame to see it. You're right with the whole form thing. The last 15 games, Killie are bottom, taking 10 points from your last 15 games, which is quite plainly nowhere near good enough for Killie. Matt, you were famously the guy who tipped St Mirren for relegation just literally a matter of weeks ago. As they eye up a European place, what's your new prediction for who's going to finish bottom and who's going to finish 11th?
It's not St Mirren, I can tell you that. I don't know. I think it's obviously still very close, and the form table doesn't give hope to anybody. We've touched on it already, but Aki's, obviously I was very impressed with them against Rangers, so they've got that to build on almost.
Right, on to your mob, Matt. Well, at least you got your kind of review or some sort of explanation from the Aberdeen board with regards to Derek McInnes' future at the club. It's maybe not the one you were after, but Dave Cormack, the Aberdeen chairman, says the club are fully behind Derek McInnes. We're at the business end of the season and we still have 33 points to play for. It's critical we all get behind Derek and the team as we strive for the best possible league finish and qualify for European football once again. What are the thoughts on that, Matt?
I think it's encouraging that Dave Cormack has come out and at least spoken to the club. There was a rumour floating about at the weekend that McInnes was getting sacked and stuff, but then literally none of the media were reporting it. It was like fans, really, is typical. The Aberdeen fans are currently in meltdown, which is fair to say. I don't agree with a lot of them, to be honest, in what they're saying. I actually think that while McInnes is maybe taken as far as we can go, I think he has, possibly. There's not been any progress this season at all, bar a purple patch maybe November, October time. It's not been great, but I think that the fact that the club have come out and backed him, I actually think now that the fans actually need to just go, look, right, we kind of need to support the team, because the reality is that European football is very much on the card still, because you can actually finish fifth and probably get into Europe, which isn't great, but he's now gone, and part of the statement was talking about the transfer deadline day signings, right? 3 last week. You need these guys to give McInnes time to work with them, and I think that that's important. Obviously, the difference at the moment is that the fans are all obviously virtual. They're not at the games and stuff, so McInnes isn't. I don't really know if the players can feed off of that, like that reaction at the moment, because obviously it's just done on social media at the moment. So really, it's up to McInnes to get them going. The reality is the players have not been good enough, I think, in the last few months. The system hadn't really changed. Like if people said, Sam Cosgrove was an issue because they tried to just lump it up to him and things like that. Well, he's gone now, and he was our goal scorer before this season, really. So we have to kind of really hit the ground running again. And I didn't catch all the game on Saturday, but against Hibs, but by all accounts, it just wasn't, it wasn't great, and that's something that they need to do. If you think back to September, they went to Easter Road and weathered the storm a little bit, but were very worthy winners, and that was a real high point of the season.
Looked like a good team.
Yeah, they did. And even when we played Hibs again in November, everybody always talks up Hibs' expansive football, things like that. Aberdeen battered them. It was 2-0. It was 2-0 after 15, 20 minutes, I think. So you really need to be getting back to those performances. Some of them have been unacceptable. Livingston last week was atrocious. The game obviously at Dingwall was, that is that's kind of unforgivable, really, that formation, but that result. But it's just, it's so frustrating, right? Because we've built up this team this season at the start of the year. Right at the start, it was obviously, the COVID-8, everything was going against them. Then they resolved, and it was our kind of real siege mentality that had been built. And it was expansive football. It was good. They've been very unlucky again with injuries. I think, Ryan Hedges is now ruled out for the season. He's arguably been our best player. They just need to kind of get back to winning ways first and foremost, but they also need to start looking, because I think the problem is the fans don't accept just now winning 1-0 against Motherwell or whatever. They actually want us to have a go and bury teams in the first half, really. And that's kind of just, that's the reality of it. Aberdeen fans have obviously become, and rightly so, because of the position of the club have moved forward in the last 8 years. And Derek McInnes has been at the forefront of that. Without him, God knows where they would have ended up, really. He's made the fans fall back in love with the club again. It's been very good seasons, but it's just gone stale. And I think that's the problem. We don't have issues like we're fighting off relegation financially. Pre-COVID, very good. New stadium, new training ground, everything's looking rosy. And Dave Cormack is a very good, he's a very good communicator. He's so active on social media. It's a bit cringe sometimes, but obviously I know him in terms of when I was working at the club and things, and he's very engaging. Just wants to have a go with things. That very American kind of philosophy on things, and really it's gone. He wants the club to do well, and I think that Derek McInnes, while he may be on borrowed time, they also can't, finances dictate as well. He's on a big contract. He's still got 18 months to go. I don't think he's going to be willing to walk away, because I think he actually wants to give it a go. I think he really wants to try and rebuild again, almost. So I'm backing him, because I think it's important that the fans do support it, but obviously, it has to improve, to be honest.
Do you think an aspect of that is, Matt, as well, in regards to Derek McInnes, about his stock is probably the lowest it has been? We're talking peak Derek McInnes is kind of 2015-16 into 2017, when obviously linked with the Rangers job and stuff. But where does he go for here as well? It's not like he could hold his hands up and potentially get a bigger job now. I think that, given that it has gone still at Aberdeen, because I understand where the Aberdeen support are coming from, that the frustrating aspects of it. Again, if you were to go back 10 years ago, after the Mark McGee days, and say to the Aberdeen support that you would be top 4 every single season, mostly top 3, top 2, for that period that Rangers were out the league, you would bite your hand off for it, but it does go still. So it's understand that. But do you think that an aspect to it is like McInnes, like the same way Lennon is at Celtic, he's clinging on because he knows that he's not got to get a bigger job than that, which is a bit of a shame, because McInnes was a highly rated manager, but I think now, the way it's worked out, I don't see him progressing from Aberdeen.
Yeah, probably, because I think if you look at, you touched on the Rangers job, obviously, and all that. He was obviously very close at probably agreeing that. Sunderland in the summer just previous to that,
West Brom.
He always gets linked with that West Brom job, because obviously he was a former captain and things like that. But he was obviously never in the running for it this time around. And I think that's kind of it. Yeah, you're right. His stock has obviously gone down. Previously, he's been very safe in the sense of the relationship with Stuart Milne. I think, because Millman never had it so good at Aberdeen, with a manager who was consistent in bringing results and, actually challenging and things like that. And I think it's similar to Kilmarnock. Aberdeen go through cycles and things like that with different, in my lifetime, I've never seen a consistent Aberdeen team before Derek McInnes came in. And I think his stock is lower, but if he could get it going again, almost, I think there'll always be a job for someone. He's young enough anyway for a start. The difference is he's obviously never going to go and get the old firm jobs. Scotland wise, below Aberdeen, there's not like a, there's no bigger club, if you know what I mean. Especially in Aberdeen fans.
I could see him being Scotland manager.
Well, see, this is it.
How you guys feel about that?
But again, his stock was high at that point, because I think when the when Steve Clark got the Scotland job, I think McInnes that was when his stock would have been high enough to have a go at that, if approached. I think he certainly, like he said quite publicly, he wants to obviously manage Scotland. But obviously, like in however many years Steve Clark's at Scotland for, McInnes would really have to build himself back up, I think, to get into that position again. That would probably be his next move if it wasn't, Scotland related, because I don't think he would go anywhere out with Aberdeen here. So
yeah, he's linked to the odd kind of job down south, as you say, Matt. But the amount of jobs that go, and I'm thinking like Derby is a perfect example. Like no mention of Derek McInnes at all, and I thought I still feel that's the kind of club he could manage. I know things have gone stale for him at Aberdeen, and I know there's people laugh at his big game record and how toothless Aberdeen can be against Celtic and Rangers in most games. But I still feel that what he's done at the club, that a team like Derby or some other kind of mid-ranking championship team with aspirations to get to the English Premier League at some stage would take a punt on him. But just earlier in the season, absolutely no mention of Derek McInnes. I don't know if that's down to, obviously Derby's the example with Wayne Rooney, but if it's down to a younger generation of managers, players who have just played over the last few years being popular choices. Jonathan Woodgate, obviously Frank Lampard's a bit different because he's a real household name. I suppose Rooney is as well, but maybe there's less opportunities there. But I think you're right, there's no one in Scotland other than the Scotland job that realistically McInnes would end up at now. I don't think he would go to any other team. Celtic and Rangers I don't think would take him at any stage as manager. So it's a strange one to watch. I just feel like they're coming to the end of the road, Aberdeen and McInnes. I might be wrong with that, but I get the feeling that next season Aberdeen might be in different hands. I know what you're saying about the 18-month contract. I just get the impression that I think the most disappointing thing is Aberdeen looked a really good team at the start of the season, and you looked like you had, for the first time in years, you weren't relying on Rooney's and McGinns and players like that. You had Hedges and you had Ferguson coming on to a game, and McCrory signed and Scott Wright looked good. It was new players, but it just seems to have gone really stale this season, and you're now very much in a fight to finish fourth with the way Livingston are playing, albeit they lost at the weekend. On that subject, was there anything from the weekend that stood out to you guys? I thought Alan Powers, going back to Kelly, Alan Powers defending for that goal was pretty suicidal.
Pathetic, mate, is the only way that I could describe it. Just, your experienced players giving away goals like that tells you everything. But I don't think that helps. I mean, out of nowhere, the St Mirren game on Saturday, Kelly just play a 3-4-3. Like, as if that's what you do. Like, that takes weeks to execute that. I don't remember seeing Kilmarnock play 3 at the back and like felt was kind of tactical literate, if you want to call it that. Like when you actually take an interest. Always been a back four. So to just out of nowhere play 3 centre halves and Gary Dicker be in there in the middle, it was just a recipe for disaster, to be honest. Whereas I appreciate they try to do something different, but with Fowler and Andy Millen, who thankfully has left the club, Andy Millen, that you tide it over it until the new man comes in, and you just make it as basic as possible. So it reeked to desperation, to be honest. And again, I respect they try to do something different, but it was just madness.
So a win for St Mirren at home. Have you seen the patter well of St Mirren's home games? Have you come across that?
No.
Do you know that so St Mirren were at home for the last 2 games. I think it was Hamilton and Kelly. They've then got 4 of their next 5 are at home as well. So 7 out of 8 games for St Mirren have all been at home. Have you ever seen a run of fixtures like that? It was the podcast fan Mark Cherry who pointed that out to me, and if you look in their fixtures, they had, I think, Hamilton and Kelly, and then their next a few games they host Celtic, then they go to Aberdeen, and then Hamilton, Livingston, Motherwell and Ross County all come to St Mirren Park. So it's a good opportunity for them to keep going up the table. They're 6th now, Jim Goodwin doing a great job there. Pitch at Ross County looked pretty ropey. I don't know if you guys saw the highlights there. Dundee United getting a good result there. 2-0 win for them at Ross County. It just seems like those teams at the bottom are going to beat each other until the end of the season, and it's interesting to see how that one will shake out. St Johnstone beat Livingston, good result. It was Martindale's first defeat, I think I'm right in saying, so a good win for St Johnstone, and obviously that's the cup final, isn't it? So a bit of positivity for St Johnstone there. Anything else you guys want to touch on? I'm purposely leaving Celtic out of this because not much to really say.
I think in fairness, Hamish, as you said about the clubs at the bottom, I still genuinely believe, though, obviously that was a massive result for Dundee United, but I still think that they've got to be right in it. Their run of fixtures until the split is concerning. I think they've got every big. I think they've got Rangers, Celtic, Aberdeen, and Hibs maybe as well. So they've still got other teams above them to play. They will pick up points. I don't doubt that though. And then when you're getting into the split, when it comes to the split, every game's got to be a 6-pointer. Because as I said, St Mirren, and deservedly so, I think will get top 6. But it's a case of this season, which we've seen in seasons gone past, that one team who does get the top 6 is ultimately safe. Like the way that they look at it. I know St Mirren only looking behind them just now. They deserve a lot of credit for the last couple of months. But at least when they secure top 6, that's them out. Whereas every other team it's just got to be a dogfight. And I think that you will see a few places switch about.
Yeah. Jobbygate, did we touch on that at all? We didn't do a podcast last week. Matt, what'd you make of that?
I mean, I don't know. I can't really put my finger on it because I mean it's not really a.
I hope not.
Good word choice there.
No, exactly. I mean, it's obviously kind of like Scottish football. Like we love kind of things like this. Obviously, it's a bit disappointing. I think you've got to assume the guys are volunteer and things like that. You're just obviously having a bit of banter, but at the same time, I get why Hamilton are trying to be professional. Like they're obviously trying to they're putting out like a service to fans and things like that. People are paying and stuff like that. But I mean, I find it weird if somebody who complained about that kind of thing. Like to be honest, like complained about like a fan buzzing in and saying, look, it's like Ofcom or something like that. Like it's not. It's kind of it's just funny, but it's a shame that obviously it's happened. I mean, I don't know. I'd like to see him get his job back.
There's obviously the talk that this commentator allegedly turned up late or something as well, wasn't there? I don't know how true that is, but they're saying that apparently he turned up to Ibrox and thought they were playing Rangers or something like that. But when I eventually heard it, I know. I mean, don't get me. When I heard that, it was a bit like, Jesus. But I don't think it's a sackable offence. But it was the fact that he kept going with it that made it worse. Like, see if he just said that first, he'd be like, aye, all right, mate. Right. But he kept getting on and on, and you're just like, right, this is a bit cringy. And if somebody said that, I mean, if any of the Kelly TV commentators listen to this, I feel bad because sometimes I think they're overly criticised. But I mean, the Kelly TV guys have been getting slated quite a lot this season with just the whole positivity because they're trying to be too positive, but they've got to be, they're employees of the club. But you can't keep treating fans like they're daft. I'm not saying they're intentionally doing that, but you know where I'm coming from. Sometimes you just got to call it as you see it. So I mean, if that happened in Kelly TV, I'd be the first to criticise it as well. But it's just. It's the guy. The fact that he kept getting on about it just made it worse. If he just said it once, you forget about it, draw a line under it. But he just kept going.
Yeah, my only surprise was it didn't come from Jerry McCulloch or Peter Martin's mouth, because we've had every other disaster this season that I wouldn't have been too surprised if that had befallen us as well.
Is Peter Martin alright, Hamish?
Christ almighty, you're talking about like delusion.
Well, Peter Maguire, sorry.
Fans on. Aye, I don't know what the patter is with that, but Peter Martin, or whatever the fuck his surname is, whatever you want to call him, we were beating Hamilton. We scored a goal to go 1-0 up in Hamilton, and he was talking about how this could be the major turning point for our season and all of that. Rangers are away about 30 points ahead of us, and we're beating Hamilton 1-0 at home. It's hitting your head off a wall. It's so frustrating. I get what you're saying. Like, you don't expect them to go, oh, this is shite, oh, terrible pass, and act like fans, but don't treat us like mugs. Don't tell us everything's amazing when what we're witnessing is like the worst Celtic team we've ever seen. Does my nut in that? Sorry, Matt, did you want to come in?
It was just about the club TV commentary and things like that. Like, it's funny because obviously every club now, or kind of every fans are getting familiar with their own commentators and things like that. And at Aberdeen, obviously, for the away games, like Rob McLean's been doing them, and he's been hosting games as well, like, you know, hosting the pre-match stuff, like at home games. And it was a game just after Scott Wright obviously kind of announced he was leaving and things like that. And they were so, this is Johnston game, he was so overly positive about like saying Scott Wright, obviously, like, and it's almost been told as if like, oh, like we've got to be positive about the situation, things like that. And realistically, every Aberdeen fan's going, why is he still playing for the club? You know, he signed a pre-contract with Rangers, he's probably going to sign in that. And they were praising, he's like, oh, he's been a brilliant asset to the team this 90 minutes or whatever. And you just think it's so funny how different the club commentary can actually be, really. And I think especially when the team's going through a poor patch, that's kind of, you know, fans aren't buying it. They don't want the fan TV to be like that. They want it to be actually how, you know, criticise the team, or at least at the very least say it was a bad pass rather than a good tackle from a different player or something like that. You know, anything. So, but it's been just on that. I was going to ask you about the club TV thing. I think, are you getting value for money now? Not in terms of the team performances, but do you think it's gone a bit like, you're sick of streaming and things like that now? Do you know what I mean?
We started the season with promises about that BT Sport team, Sunset and Vine, coming in, and we get promises about Michael Stewart being on the analysis and Rory Hamilton doing the commentary. And just like Celtic's season, it's just imploded and got worse and worse as the season's gone on. We're now at a situation where Jerry McCulloch was in commentary duties on Saturday. I personally think Tom Boyd's going to be wheeled back in at some stage. Connie McLaughlin, who is nothing against, and I think she's pretty good, but like, she's not part of Sunset and Vine, so why is she suddenly been brought in, you know, in February? So that's annoyed me. But the club have your money, so what are you going to do about it other than moan on Twitter? They don't care about a few replies. They'll just mute you and get on with it. But I think clubs are trying hard. What's that?
I was going to say, will you be able to get Tom Boyd, or will we be too busy speaking to Paul Larkin about Masonic conspiracy theories against Celtic?
He's unbelievable, Tom Boyd. He's actually quite a nice guy, but
I've heard that.
He should not be a pundit. It was not a whole controversy with him last year, saying something about paranoia or something. Just totally embarrassing. Right, we're nearly done, guys. One thing I want to do before we finish the podcast is going to take a rare opportunity to just lay into another sport. That sport is rugby union. The Scottish national team, for me, completely embarrassed themselves at the weekend. Not on the pitch, but with several players, and England players as well, refusing to take a knee prior to the match. Can you imagine, Callum, if this had been a football team? That wee nippy would be out criticising them 5 minutes later. Instead, she's drinking pints for the Calcutta Cup.
Without a doubt, I think that it's, I mean, I've kind of switched off from it myself personally, so I can only give my viewpoint on it and how I see it. I'm not going to lie, it's been pretty tiresome. I've not even bothered to really read further into it. I think there's people are trying to say there's some element of confusion, but you've seen this happen in every single sporting event, every single football game since the beginning of the season. The players take a knee, and look at the actual, when the fans were allowed in the ground, when Millwall, I mean, when the players done it and the Millwall fans were booing and get absolutely rightly ripped into them because it was disgusting, and that's with players taking part, you know what I mean? So if could you imagine a team in Scotland, as I said, refused to do that, would do this about football fans, hooligans, racists, X, Y, Z. But it's just a joke, and obviously there's people who are maybe sick of the gesture of the knee. For me, I'm a bit like, I think they should still be doing it. I don't think that, like, I mean, for the sake of less than 2 seconds before every game, to raise a bit of awareness for like black people getting slaughtered in America by the police force. I don't see. Don't get me wrong. I would like to see more action done, but that's not for football players to do. In regards to just the gesture of the knee, I think says enough. As I say, it's less than 2 seconds. It's not even like a minute silence before every game or something. 2 seconds, raise a bit of awareness, and then go on with it. And the fact that the players did, and it was so bad because it wasn't even. a couple, it was like the majority of the players were they taking it, and you're like, what is going on here? So maybe there was confusion, but for me, every single game since August. Remember at the beginning of the season, we've seen a couple of players going too early when the referees blow the whistle, and you've seen the guy trying to run down the line and think, oh no, wait, I need to get back. And that's been kind of had a bit of a laugh over. Players have held their hands up about that, and there's been no malice, straight down, paid their respects. But this is just, it's terrible. And the reaction, I don't think the reactions in the press and stuff's been good enough. I think that should be discussed more. And as you can say, if football was involved in that, then I dread to see it wouldn't be the front pages of every single newspaper in the country.
Matt, you're a rugby believer. State your case.
I mean, I like the internationals. That's what I take it. Scotland internationals.
You were hashtagging as one on Saturday.
No, I was retweeting. I've done as one once, and then that's fine. But no, I totally. I mean, I'm very much for taking the knee and everything like that, and very much on board with the criticism, especially initially. However, I actually do kind of think, just by speaking to a couple of like rugby people, if you like, who kind of follow it a bit more and things like that. Well, speaking to Callum Kerr, about a good friend of the pod, and he was saying about, look, the confusion actually, there genuinely seems to be confusion about this.
Yeah.
Because even like, I think the Six Nations initially, they weren't doing it at all, but I think it was almost more because there's multiple, not about taking the knee or anything like that, but I don't know, I just think there's so much confusion across the board with rugby, and I think that's where they need to really be educating it. Not educating themselves on Black Lives Matter, but educating themselves in terms of, look, are we doing this? And if they are, I think they should be doing it. But if they're not, then, you know, every other sport is doing it, so everyone should do it as one, if you like. Because if you look at it in the video, like the Scotland players, like they weren't aware that, I think, that they were going to be doing it. And then a few England players went down, and then they looked across the line, and you're thinking, oh shit, we should be doing this? Yeah, so then they do it. It's disappointing because I very much think that everybody should be doing it. I just think that Scottish rugby and English rugby actually need to come out and say, look, there was confusion. This Saturday against Wales, just do it. You know, and that's the end of the matter, because it has to be. For me, I'm very much in agreement with Casey about, like, I think that taking the knee at sport right now needs to be highlighted more than anything, to be honest, if it can be done, because you see weekly Man United players were getting racially abused, you know, until people stop doing that, which is years away probably, they need to be making a stand on that now more than ever. Sorry, Casey.
You want to come in?
No, sorry, I just on that, and I can see that there probably was an element of confusion, but again, say there is, like, I just don't think that washes when it comes to football as well. I mean, could you imagine if players didn't do it in the Scottish Premiership and folks said, oh, we didn't know if we were meant to do it, they'd be absolutely slaughtered for it.
You're right.
Surely, don't get me wrong, I know Scotland, England, like, I don't like rugby, but like, that's a football podcast, and we're all aware of that, and you're all aware of my views on rugby as well. But I mean, like I get that it's obviously probably the biggest game for each country in the Six Nations. Well, certainly for Scotland, playing England always is, and I get that the last thing in your head before getting into a massive game like that is, oh wait, what we doing before kick-off again? But surely it's going to be discussed. I mean, every single football match for August has done it, July has done it, so I don't understand why that hasn't been discussed whatsoever. Even if there's been no communication for the Six Nations to say, are we doing it or no? Surely the players in the Scotland national team, the media guys who have got to be briefing folk and stuff like this, have got to be like, right, are we doing it or no? Because if we're no, then we'll all stand and respect it, and we'll come out after the game and say that's exactly what we've done, or we'll just all make a stand and do it. So I just think, had that happened in football, again, it would be totally and utterly, like, they'd be lambasted in the press.
Yeah, listen, as much as I'd love to sit here and chat about rugby for the next half an hour, we should probably get on with the rest of our lives and say that is the end of the podcast. This has been a sombre episode, but we've had a wee laugh, guys, about how miserable our three teams are. If you're a fan of virtually any other team in the country, with probably the exception of Dundee, you can have a good laugh at us. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. Yeah, Burstball will return very soon, hopefully next week. Take care, and we'll speak to you then.